The first thing I noticed was how comfortable she looked in my kitchen. Not uncomfortable. Not guilty. Not like someone who knew she was standing in a place she didn't belong. My best friend of 14 years was leaning against my counter, laughing at something my husband said, and she looked more at home than I did after 7 years of living there. I told myself I was being paranoid. I'd been telling myself that for a long time. Before we get into it, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love knowing who's in the room with me. My name is Meredith. I was 29 years old when everything fell apart, and 31 by the time I understood what had actually happened. I'm a structural engineer. I've spent my career making sure things don't collapse under pressure. I am very good at my job. I was not, for a long time, very good at seeing what was happening inside my own home. My husband, I'll call him by what he was. My husband. We met when I was 22, married at 25. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming. Not loud about it, not showy. He had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the room when he was paying attention to you. The problem, which I only understood later, was that he gave that feeling to a lot of people. He was generous with it. Indiscriminate. My best friend. I'll call her my best friend, because that's what I believed she was. We'd known each other since college. Freshman year, same dorm, same floor. She was the first person I called when my dad got his diagnosis. She was the maid of honor at my wedding. She held my hand in the hospital when I delivered my daughter, because my husband was stuck in traffic and didn't make it in time. I forgave him for that. She was there, and I forgave him, and I thought, this is what a good marriage looks like. People who forgive, people who work through things. What I didn't know, what I should have seen, was that forgiveness in our house was only ever flowing in one direction. It started small. Or maybe it didn't start small and I just processed it small, because the alternative was something I couldn't hold yet. My husband started coming home later. Not dramatically late. 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour. He always had a reason. Traffic on the 405, a call that ran over, a project that needed him. He worked in commercial real estate. Long hours were normal, or at least normalizable. I was working 60-hour weeks myself. I was up for a promotion that would put me in charge of a regional infrastructure project worth about $40 million. I didn't have a lot of bandwidth for suspicion. I was tired. I thought we were both tired. My best friend started coming around more during this same stretch of time. I didn't connect those two things because why would I? She was my person. She showed up with wine and takeout and sat with me on the couch while I vented about deadlines and my impossible project manager and the slow creep of exhaustion that had settled into my bones. She was the one constant thing that felt easy, and I needed something to feel easy. The promotion came through in February. I got the call on a Tuesday morning, standing in the parking structure at work, and I started crying right there between my car and someone's silver Tacoma. 14 months of 70-hour weeks, every weekend I didn't take, every vacation I postponed. My daughter asking me why I was always on the phone, and me promising her it would get better soon. I called my husband first. He said congratulations and that we should celebrate, and there was something in his voice I couldn't name. A flatness, maybe. A beat too short before he spoke. I told myself he was just tired. I called my best friend second. She screamed. She actually screamed into the phone and said she was taking me out Friday night. No arguments. I deserve this. Friday dinner was at a place in Silver Lake. One of those restaurants where the cocktails have names you have to ask about and the entrees come out slowly and you don't mind. It was my best friend and me and 2 other women from our friend group, and it was good. It was genuinely good. We stayed until they started stacking chairs. I drove home feeling something close to light. My husband wasn't home when I got there. I checked my phone. No text. I waited up. He came in around midnight, said he'd lost track of time with a client. Sorry. He knew I'd be back late anyway. I didn't push it. I was warm from 2 glasses of wine and the best evening I'd had in months. I kissed him and went to sleep. 3 weeks later, I found the receipt. It wasn't even hidden. It was in his jacket pocket, the one I was sending to the dry cleaner. From the same restaurant in Silver Lake. Same Friday night. Dinner for 2, $160. a bottle of wine I recognized from the menu. I stood in our bedroom with that receipt in my hand for a very long time. I want to be precise about what happened next, because I've thought about it a lot since. I didn't scream. I didn't call him. I didn't call him. I didn't call her. I set the receipt on the dresser and I walked to the kitchen and I poured myself a glass of water. And I stood at the window and I watched the street below. A neighbor walked a small dog. A car pulled out of a driveway. The street was ordinary and quiet and completely indifferent to the fact that I was standing there with my whole understanding of the last year rearranging itself. I didn't say anything. Not that night. I made a folder on my laptop and I labeled it Projects. I had about 14 folders with that label, so one more didn't register, and I saved a photo of the receipt in it. Then I went to bed. What I knew about my husband and my best friend was not enough. Not yet. What I had was a receipt that could be explained, improbably, but not impossibly. What I needed was more than improbable. I needed undeniable, because I knew, with the part of my brain that had survived everything by being methodical, that if I confronted them too early, they would build a wall, they would coordinate, they would make me look unstable. I had seen this happen to a woman at my firm. Her husband left, took what he could, and framed her in the proceedings as erratic and difficult to work with. I was not going to be that woman, so I became very quiet, and very careful, and very present. I started noticing the things I had been too busy to see, how my best friend's schedule had shifted. She used to be a morning person, called me on her commute, but those calls had dropped off. How she always knew things about our home that I hadn't told her, that the kitchen faucet was dripping, that my husband had been stressed about a particular deal. Small things, the kind of things you only know if you're talking to someone regularly. How my husband had started putting his phone face down on the nightstand, which he never used to do. I also started noticing things about the project I'd been promoted to lead. My firm had brought in an outside consultant to handle the structural documentation for the public bid. It was a city contract, a freeway overpass renovation in the valley, and there was a tight compliance window. The consultant was supposed to be coordinating with me. Instead, I started getting CC'd on emails where decisions had already been made, where my name was listed as a contributor on documents I hadn't written. Methodology notes that didn't match mine, a phrasing in the risk assessment that was close to my language but not quite, like someone had read my work and then paraphrased it quickly, hoping no one would look twice. I looked twice, I printed everything, I date-stamped it, I saved the originals to a separate drive, and then I kept showing up. To work, to home. To every dinner with my best friend where she sat across from me and laughed at the right moments and touched my arm when I talked about being tired. I kept showing up and I kept watching and I kept saving everything I found. In April, my daughter said something that cracked something open in me. We were driving to her Saturday morning soccer practice and she was looking out the window and she said without any particular emphasis, "Dad's friend is nice." I kept my eyes on the road. Which friend? She thought about it. The one with the curly hair. She comes over sometimes when you're at work. I nodded. I said, "Yeah, she seems nice." And I turned into the parking lot of the soccer field and I helped her get her cleats out of the back seat and I watched her run onto the grass and I sat in the car for a long time before I started it again. That evening I checked our home security system. We had cameras on the front door and the driveway, installed after a car got broken into on our block 2 years ago. I had not, until that night, thought to look at the footage archive for anything other than package deliveries. I looked. I will not describe in detail what I found in that archive. What I will say is that it was enough, more than enough. And I will say that the timestamp on one particular afternoon's footage was a Thursday in March, which was the same Thursday I had been in Sacramento for a site inspection and had told both of them separately that I would not be home until the following evening. I copied the footage to a drive. I labeled it insurance. No different, visually, from the 11 other drives on my shelf. I put it in the back of the closet behind a box of my daughter's old art projects. Then I called my attorney. Her name is not relevant. What is relevant is that she is very good. She has handled exactly this kind of case before, And she told me in a calm voice exactly what I needed to document, exactly what I needed to stop doing, and exactly what I needed to stop doing, and exactly what I needed to start. I stopped putting my name on joint accounts. My husband and I had kept our finances mostly separate. We split the mortgage, the utilities, the shared card for groceries, but there was a joint savings account we'd maintained since the first year of marriage. I began quietly moving my direct deposits into a personal account I'd opened at a different bank. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would trigger a conversation, just the slow, steady redirection of what was mine. I talked to HR at my firm. Quietly, I explained that I had reason to believe my name and methodology were being used without authorization on the city project documentation. I provided the printed emails. I provided the date-stamped originals. I did not make accusations. I presented facts and let them be facts. HR forwarded it to legal. Legal opened an inquiry. The outside consultant was asked to produce originals. He couldn't. In May, my husband sat me down at the kitchen table. Our daughter was at a sleepover and told me he thought we should try couples counseling. He said he felt like we'd grown apart. He said it very gently, like he was delivering news I didn't already know. He said he still cared about me and he wanted us to work on things. I said I would think about it. I didn't tell him that 3 days earlier I had signed a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment in Pasadena, 11 minutes from my daughter's school. I didn't tell him that I had already moved the things that mattered. Her artwork, my grandmother's jewelry, the external drive with 17 years of photos, the folder labeled projects and the drive labeled insurance, out of the house in stages in my work bag over the course of 2 weeks. I didn't tell him any of that. I said, I'll think about it, and I got up and poured him more coffee, and I made dinner, and we watched something on TV, and I put my daughter to bed, and I was perfectly, absolutely ordinary. The following Friday, I got up early. My daughter and I had a standing Saturday ritual. We always went to the farmer's market on Sunset and got those ridiculous rose and lemonade things she loved, and I pretended not to love. I packed her a bag the night before. I told her we were doing something special this weekend, starting Saturday morning. She asked if we could get the lemonade, and I said obviously yes, that was the whole point. Friday night, I made dinner. I cleaned the kitchen. I folded the laundry. I did every ordinary domestic thing I had always done, and I did it without any particular feeling, which is when I knew I had already left. In my mind, I had already been gone for weeks. My body was just catching up. I waited until my husband was asleep. Then I got up, got my daughter up quietly, told her we were having an adventure, and we drove to Pasadena. She fell asleep in the back seat before we hit the freeway. I carried her up to the apartment. I put her in the bed I had already made with her favorite sheets, the ones with the little stars on them, and I sat on the floor next to the bed for a while in the dark. I didn't cry. I had expected to cry. I just sat there and the apartment was quiet and it smelled like new paint, and I thought, this is the beginning of something. I didn't know yet what it was, but it was something. My husband texted at 9 the next morning. Where are you? I didn't respond. My attorney did. What followed was not fast and it was not clean, and I am not going to pretend it was. There was a custody arrangement to negotiate. There was the house, which we had purchased together but which I had made most of the down payment on, documented, with a paper trail from my savings. There were conversations I do not want to recount, from my husband and from my best friend, separately, both of whom wanted to explain, to contextualize, to ask me to understand. I didn't need to understand. I didn't need to understand. I had already done my understanding, alone, at night, over many months, with files and dates and footage and a very good attorney and the kind of clarity that only comes when you stop hoping something isn't true. What I want to tell you is what happened with my firm. The outside consultant was found to have used my risk assessment methodology on 2 previous city contracts, not just ours. My documentation, the originals, the dates, the paper trail I had been keeping for months before I even understood why, became the foundation of an IP dispute that my firm pursued and won. My name was formally credited on all 3 contracts. There was a financial settlement, most of which went to the firm, but a meaningful portion was allocated to me as the originating engineer. I used it to buy out my husband's share of the house. He didn't fight me on it. I think by the time we were sitting across from each other in that mediation room, he had understood something that I had not been losing. I had been deciding. My best friend called once more, in late fall, about 6 months after everything was done. She said she wanted to explain. She said she never meant for it to happen the way it happened. She said she still loved me in her way. I listened to the whole message. I didn't call back. There's nothing I wanted to hear from her that she could have said. Not because I'm still angry. I'm not anymore. But because an explanation is for the person giving it. It makes them feel better. It closes a loop for them. And I realized, listening to her voice, that I no longer had any loop that needed closing on her behalf. My daughter and I have Saturday mornings. We still get the lemonade. Last month, she told me that our apartment feels like home now. And I almost said it was always going to, because I had made sure it was, because I had been making sure for longer than she knew. But I just said, good, I'm glad. My firm gave me the regional lead position on a new project this spring, a pedestrian bridge renovation in the east side of the city, the kind of project that I'll drive past for the rest of my life. My daughter wants to come to the site when there's something to see. I told her, of course. I told her she can see exactly how you build something that's meant to last. There's a thing they teach you in structural engineering, that the strongest designs are not the ones that resist all pressure. They're the ones that know how to flex, how to absorb, how to redirect force rather than fight it. You build in the capacity for movement. You make the structure intelligent enough to distribute what it's given rather than be crushed by it. I think about that a lot. I think about how, for years, I was absorbing everything and distributing none of it. I was just holding, and holding, and holding, until something in me got very quiet and very still and said, this is not a structure that's failing. This is a structure that knows it's time to rebuild. I am 31 years old. My name is on 3 city contracts. My daughter has the star sheets and the lemonade and Saturday mornings. And they, both of them, have exactly what they chose. If you've ever had to walk away from people who thought your leaving was the end of your story, tell me in the comments. I want to hear from you, and I'll see you in the next one. I used to think that the hardest part of what happened to me was the betrayal itself. The receipt in the jacket pocket, the security footage, the afternoon in March. I thought those were the moments that would stay with me the longest. The images I'd have to work to unsee, but that's not what stayed. What stayed was the silence, my own silence. The months I spent knowing something was wrong and choosing deliberately not to react. Not because I was weak, because I was thinking. And I think that's the part of the story that I want to sit with for a moment, because it's the part that changed me the most. There's a version of me that confronts them the night I find the receipt, that throws it on the counter, demands answers, cries, breaks things, calls her at midnight. I know that version of me. I've been her before, in smaller situations. She gets loud and she gets righteous and she gets absolutely nowhere. Because loud and righteous without preparation is just noise, and noise gives the other person time to build a defense. What I did instead was think. I thought about what I actually had versus what I needed. I thought about my daughter and what stability meant for her. I thought about my work and the methodology someone was quietly stealing under my name. I thought about all of it at once. The way you think about load distribution on a structure. Where is the pressure coming from? Where does it need to go? What breaks first if I miscalculate? That's intelligence, I think. Not the kind that scores well on tests, but the kind that keeps you standing when everything around you is being designed to make you fall. The kind that says, I see what's happening. I'm not going to pretend I don't, and I'm going to be precise about what I do next. My husband and my best friend made a calculation. They calculated that I was too busy, too tired, too trusting to look. They were right about 2 of those things. They were wrong about the third. And here is what I understand now about how things tend to work out. Not because the universe balances itself in some mystical sense, but because choices have weight. Every choice you make pulls something along behind it. They chose to deceive, and the weight of that, the logistics of it, the coordination, the cover stories, requires a kind of ongoing effort that erodes everything else. People who are busy lying don't have a lot of room left for building anything real. What they built together was constructed on the assumption that I would never look. When I did, there was nothing underneath it. I'm not a person who believes that good behavior is automatically rewarded. I don't think being honest guarantees you anything. What I believe is simpler and, to me, more useful. Integrity is a practice, and like any practice, it compounds. Every time I showed up honestly to my work, to my daughter, to my own grief, I was building something. Slowly, unglamorously, without anyone watching. The paper trail, the saved files, the lease in Pasadena, the attorney. Every quiet, careful decision I made in those months was a load-bearing element in something I didn't have a name for yet. I have a name for it now. It's just my life. It's mine. And it holds. If you're in the middle of something right now that feels like it's designed to make you doubt yourself, I want you to know that clarity is available to you. It might not come loudly. It might come at 2 in the morning while you're standing in your kitchen drinking water and trying to breathe, but it comes. And when it does, the question is not what to feel, the question is what to do next. Be methodical. Be patient. Be honest about what you actually have and what you still need. And when you move, move with everything.